It is. And that moment where you recognize that your identity is connected to another individual, your identity is defined by how they say you are, how they describe who you are. That's a hard moment because you recognize that, one, you've given somebody a huge amount of power. You've also given them the ability to control where you're going in life, control where your goals are.
Hi, and welcome to Don't Drink to Feed podcast. This podcast is all about you and all the courageous, driven women like you. We are here to inspire, to empower, to share, and to embrace one another. We will be talking with women from different backgrounds and careers about love, family, friendship, their wins and falls, and what it took for them to live the life they love. I am your host, Claudia Noriega Bernstein, and I am so happy you're here today. Perfect. Hi, Tara. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you very much for being here with us and sharing your story.
Yeah, absolutely. I look forward to it. This is great.
So tell me a little bit about yourself.
Sure. So I have 4 children. 7 years ago, it was like kind of my breaking point. I've been through a lot of loss in my life. I've experienced a lot of trauma and loss, but my breaking point probably was the moment that my divorce came to a head, and it came as a shock. I was unaware of it. And at that point, we were in the process of creating this beautiful life with a business, and I had a practice, and life just seemed like it was smooth sailing at that point. Our kids were young. I had just actually had my daughter at that point. So it was an emotional part of my life, right? Because I have 3 boys and my daughter is the youngest. And so at that point, I thought I was going to stay home with my daughter and be able to enjoy that time with her, being that she was the only girl.
Right.
And at that moment, I was approached by my ex-husband, and the whole process of it, for me, it came as a shock. I was on my way to taking kids to their normal orientations with school. I was in the car midstream, and he approached me at the window and said, "Our marriage is done. I'm in love with somebody else, and you know her." So that moment was like my breaking moment, because one, it came as a complete shock. 2, it involved so much. The woman that he ended up with and married was a friend of ours. And I had connection with her. I had just thrown her birthday party. So there was a lot of connection in regards to relationships. And in that moment, all of a sudden, I felt betrayed on many levels. When you go through divorce, you feel like you're betrayed by your husband. I felt at that moment that I was betrayed by anything, like my ability to know what a good relationship is, my ability to trust friends, girlfriends, my ability to know what life is really about, and whether or not I could decipher between good and bad. And so there was a lot of emotions at that point, betrayal, and the aspect that our marriage was about to crash. And everything we had worked really hard for was now going to be gone. And our children, there was a lot involved. They had 5 kids. We had 4. They were all friends. And so it was, how do we recreate in this moment and savor everything that we've built for years and years? So that was the moment I went driving and ended up just in tears. I look back and I'm like, wow, how did I actually make it home without being in the ditch? Because I was just driving and you're just crying, and you don't think about it when you're in the motion. And so it was a real huge moment for me. And from there, I went through bouts of depression, bouts of even suicidal thoughts at one point. I've created all this, and now what? How am I going to dig myself out of this hole? And there was moments of like, I might as well just give up, because this is so many years that we've created, and now life is full of brokenness. Like every aspect of my life was touched, whether you're looking at financial, emotional, physical, and it affected everyone. And so I will say like the next 3 months after that, I
Mhm.
isolated. I didn't talk to anyone. I basically was like a movie, watching myself go through a movie. Get up,
Right.
put the kids on the bus, go back to bed, sleep for the rest of the day. Right before they got out the bus, I would hurry up and clean and then put my smile on and move on. And it was a really exhausting. And I had been through other traumas in my life. I have been through abuse in my life. And I thought that was pretty hard. But I will say that that moment probably was the hardest out of.
Do you think it affected you so much because the trust that you had in him and your friend?
I think it was more the trust. I tend to trust people with a big heart, and I trust them with everything that I have, and I give them a lot of leeway. And I had to
Mm-hmm.
realize that my boundaries were out of whack. Looking back now, I understand where boundaries are. At that point in my life, I had no boundaries. Like, I gave everybody every chance they could have. And so at that moment, realizing that betrayal was such a large part of it, I think that was for me the last straw. I mean, divorce is devastating. And I recognized years later that I had actually been in a marriage where there was a lot of verbal abuse, to the point where I recognized simple things that I thought I could go do were controlled. And so it opened the door to help me look within myself and
Mm-hmm.
recognize what are those comfortable moments that I tend to gravitate to and why. And so there was a lot of self-reflection. I've been divorced 7 years now.
The
At moments,
perception changes with the years. Absolutely.
yeah,
Do you feel a sense of grief?
I did for many years.
Mm-hmm.
There was a deep moment. I would say for the first year,
Mm-hmm.
was probably the hardest. The first 6 months, I lost 110 pounds, and people were like, like, what are you doing? Like, we owned 3 gyms, so everybody was like, what
Mm-hmm.
weight loss program are you on? And I'm like,
Right.
this is not a weight loss program. But at that moment, we couldn't share it with anyone. We lived in a small community. Everybody knew us because we had businesses that people knew us in the community for. So the hardest part for me was, how do we move from this
Right.
when we're in the public eye, when we're so intertwined with a community, and your business is now going to be exploited in this small town? And just recognizing, like, through the process, like,
Mm-hmm.
betrayal doesn't just start with one person, right? Like, once people started to find out, I lost a lot of friends.
Right. They take sides. They
Mm-hmm.
go either with the husband or with the wife. And I hear you talking, and I imagine that part of your identity was being his wife. You were not just Tara, you were the wife of. So when that gets dissolved, then you face the reality of, who am I? How am I going to keep on going? And how am I going to show up to my kids? Because you don't want to show up to them as an angry, scorned, resentful woman. You want to show up to them as light as you can, so you can help them also go through that process.
Yeah. And I will say that that was the hardest, because in the process, we went through a lot. And I recognized through a lot of counseling that I was
Mm-hmm.
married to very narcissistic behavior. And so a lot of my transitioning out of divorce meant that I had to put physical separation, which made the divorce a lot more difficult, because anytime you put distance between yourself and the other individual, there's more pull, right? There's
Right.
more fighting. But I recognized in that moment how much God was just like, you need distance at this time. You need to move far away. And for me, I would like move 30 minutes. I'd move like 15 minutes. We moved like, I think 5 times in like 2 years, because I was just fighting God. Because I was like, okay, God, I'll move like 15 miles. Like, we'll see what
Mm-hmm.
that's like.
It's never
Separate.
about the physical distance. It's more, where are you emotionally? What is going to give you the strength? Because sometimes I hear people saying, I can deal with this or that, I need a vacation. And then they go somewhere, and the problems and the drama and the stress goes with them. So it's just geographically different, but you are in the same place per se. No
Yeah.
matter how far you moved, you were in the same place.
You can't move from your problems.
No.
For me, it was I needed some physical space just to be able to have the thought process without the constant
Bumping into him.
interaction of
Right.
everybody else. I had to isolate for a little while. There was probably a year or so where we ended up having to really just move far away. I ended up moving to Pennsylvania. A door opened up there, and I recognized that in that moment for me, that distance was helpful. It was healing for me because I had just myself to deal with. I had to look internally. I had to really identify aspects about myself that normally I would focus more on my children or focus more on what was happening around me. And God just really pulled me aside and was like, I'm going to isolate you for a little while so you can work on you. And in that moment, I recognized I needed that so then I could have a good foundation to be able to handle everything that was happening with the kids.
So I imagine taking responsibility because, yes, he was unfaithful, he did you wrong, but also where are the areas where I could have done better? Not in the relationship, because I mean, it's not that you have to cater to the man so he doesn't go cheat, but where were the red flags that I didn't see? Where is
Yes.
my responsibility in all this? Because sometimes we want to have this perfect reality and we choose not to look at what is wrong or what is happening or what is not aligned with what we want. And that is our responsibility. We have to own it and say, wait a minute, the signs were there. I just chose not to look at them. Right?
Yeah, a lot of that I had to work through myself, and a lot of it was tough. I had to be really vulnerable. And I would say it took me about a year to really be vulnerable with myself. It was, I recognized that first year was kind of like a numbing aspect. I was completely in shock and numb. And when the numb kind of wore off, and I realized I needed to now look within, it really took some time, but it's so important because if we don't deal with ourselves, all we do is repeat the behavior.
Absolutely. Either you evolve or you repeat. Those are your two choices. And also, I think the pause that we should take in between the no longer. This is no longer what we thought it was going to be or it was to the not yet. That pause. And I can identify with you because I also went through a divorce. My husband also was unfaithful. And you second guess yourself. You know, your value, your worth, your intelligence. Why I didn't see what happened. Now, I have learned that when men do that has a lot more to do with them and their insecurities and their ego and their narcissistic and then all that stuff than with us. We are just holding a space to an extent. And that motion is created and is done by them. But that doesn't mean we're not going to be affected. And our self-esteem is not going to suffer. We would have to be made of stone. Somebody is choosing somebody else instead of choosing us. It's painful.
It is. And that moment where you recognize that your identity is connected to another individual, your identity is defined by how they say you are, how they describe who you are. That's a hard moment because you recognize that one, you've given somebody a huge amount of power. You've also given them the ability to control where you're going in life, control where your goals are. One thing that God told me when I asked him why all this happened, I remember God saying, it's because he can't go where I already created you to go. And in that moment, that's what I held on to. Because for me, it was like, oh, I've been so wrapped up in who he thinks I am and how I need
Who
to
he wanted
conform to
you
that.
to be. Because let's think about it, he didn't really know who you were.
No.
He had an idea of who he wanted you to be, and you shrunk to fit in whatever he thought you should have been or you were meant to be. And the minute that he left, he gave you an opportunity to really look inside yourself and say, hey, you know what? I don't want to be that. I want to be something else. And I'm going to be somebody else. I'm going to be who I am meant to be, which is a lot richer than what I was settling for.
And it's so interesting too, because our identity is internal. It wraps around every aspect of who we are.
Yeah.
And so if your identity is not rooted and grounded in who you think you are, it's so easily like able to crumble. It's so easy being able to be broken. There was a lot of moments where like I would just spend, and it's so interesting because like for me, I wanted to be an art teacher. So art was my saving grace in some ways because
Right.
like that's how I discovered like how was I really feeling here? What did that look like? What emotions am I experiencing and why am I experiencing them? And then a lot of it was identifying, oh my goodness, we're just repeating what our parents did, or we're repeating a behavior that we've been taught growing up.
Mm-hmm.
And when you put both of those two families together, I started to recognize why, like in the olden days, they would like meet the parents and they would identify, is this going to be a good match?
Right.
And there's some validity in that because there is a lot. Like you come with your core beliefs, you come with your values, and you come with everything that you've been taught as a child. And now you're trying to mold that together,
Mm-hmm.
as one unit. And that's hard. And if you don't have the ability to be vulnerable, if you don't have the ability to be open and in a raw moment with each other, then all you're doing is living life and walking through each moment, looking for the
Yeah.
fun next moment to live.
It's a default living.
Mm,
There is no living with purpose when you live that way. You
yeah.
just take what is given to you and then you pretend that you're happy with that. And
Mm,
then you wait for the next high. And then
yes.
you keep on going until you get the wake up call.
Yes.
And you have to face the music and say, well, wait a minute. Not only I'm not going to do anymore what he wanted me to do, but he's not even in the picture anymore.
Yes.
So now I have to figure it out. Who am I? What I like, what I don't like, where do I want to be, who I want to become. In a way, when I talk to my clients, I tell them you sometimes need to unbecome what you have become based on what people told you, what your family told you you should be. Your religion sometimes tell you who you should be. Oh, and then you accumulate all these limited beliefs and you become somebody that is a result of all that, but not necessarily who you really are. Oh, and there is a lot of you that doesn't get exposed. You don't get to enjoy it. You probably would have been an amazing art teacher when you were in your 20s before you even get married with him, and your life would be totally different. But you follow what you thought it was expected, what you thought your family or his family or your friends thought that was best for you. So you bought the idea. And that's what we do. We buy the idea and we look for evidence everywhere to support that and say, yeah, I know. I don't know if it ever happened to you that you go to a museum and there is a very weird painting and everybody's staring at the painting. And then people start saying, I see a face. And somebody else goes, yeah, me too. And I'm like, I don't see anything. But you do that, right? We do that. We convince ourselves and then suddenly we're like, yeah, and there is a boat out there. Yeah, I see it too. But it's not true. We just allowed people to influence us.
And it's because like it goes back to what you said before.
We don't
We don't
pause.
pause long enough to figure out, is that something that we want to partake in? Is it something we want to welcome in, right? Because we're all about thoughts, right? Our thought process, our brain is where we begin everything in life because life is full of choices. And those choices are birthed up in our brain. And so many times we're in this, I call it microwavable world, that we don't spend long enough to really just pause and be like, is that a good thought? Is that thought something that I really want to see walked out in my life right now? Do I want to see that transpired? Because once we have that thought and it goes to the cortex where it's like rationalized and put into action, it's like, let me think about that. Do I really want to see that in action? And in my divorce, that's like what I began to see was I was like, oh my goodness, I was living a fast forward movie very, very quickly. Like I was just watching it on fast forward because it was all these decisions that were just real quick. And it was just a matter of realizing that like I wasn't bold enough to have a voice. I wasn't bold enough to speak up and say, not me, you can do that but that's not for me. And that's huge. Sometimes when we go through that, those parts is what I had to recognize for me, because going into a new relationship, or whoever I will eventually have a relationship with, I don't want that. I don't
You
want
don't
to
want to
have
bring
that
that
repeat.
baggage, right, with you. Yeah, you're absolutely right. This is why it's important to pause and really make the decision who I want to be. And if
Yeah.
this is not aligned with that, then I'm not taking it with me. I'm
Yes.
gonna leave it behind with the drama and the lying and the betray and all that. I'm gonna leave it
Mm.
behind, and I'm just gonna rescue what's gonna serve me to have the life that I want to have.
Yeah. I also think communication is huge. I recognize from my divorce, a lot
Mm-hmm.
of the reason why betrayal came in, a lot of reason why adultery came in, was because we were not able to communicate effectively to the
Mm-hmm.
point where we could be raw. We would
Right.
talk about it at surface level, I'd call it, but it was just scratching the surface. And so when realizing, okay, how can I communicate better this time around? How can I communicate better going forward, so that way when this relationship is another opportunity, I don't want to repeat the same bad behaviors in
The same
regards to
patterns.
communication.
Right.
And there were so many times where I would just be like, oh well, it's not worth the fight, or oh well, I'm just gonna like
Mm.
sleep it off tonight, maybe tomorrow it will change, right? Or oh, is this one really worth it, because maybe I want to like save all the energy for the next conversation that we have to have. And so learning that those like are really not good behaviors. Like a lot of times we're told that marriage is like marriage is a great love. Oh,
Mm-hmm.
that's what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to love the other person, but it
Yeah.
needs so much more than love.
It's the fairy tale idea.
Yes.
And I think that every relationship that is worth having needs some work. And
Yes.
I don't say work in a negative way, but it needs some work. You need to work in the relationship. You need to bring something to the table. You need to ask questions. You need to have empathy for the other person. You need to stay true to yourself and not emulate to become somebody else. And that's work. You
Yeah.
have to make that commitment with yourself every day. I am bringing this to the table. I'm not going to stop being myself. And in order for this to work, I'm not going to shrink. I'm not going to pretend that that didn't happen. I'm not going to turn the page because I don't want to have this fight and everything is okay today. Those conversations have to happen, even if they're difficult conversation, because that is actually the only way you get to know your partner. So what you tell him, in a way, you didn't know who he was and he had no clue who you were.
True, because those crucial conversations are what's so important. We can have those surface conversations like, how are you today? You're doing great. How are the kids
Right.
doing? Oh, the kids have this or this happening. But those are surface questions. Or even, how are you feeling today? Those kind of questions are still surface questions. There's so much more. And it's when the conversation becomes uncomfortable. That's what matters.
Yeah. How is your
Those
relationship with him now?
7 years later, it is good. It has been a journey. There was a lot of moments where he would call, social services would come and check in my fridge,
Oh,
just your
right.
basic stuff. But there was the book of text of, what are you doing? Or checking in to see if I was dating somebody. It was like more annoying, if anything else, because it was just like, we're done. Drop it.
I'm assuming that relationship didn't last.
No, they're still married, and
Oh, they are.
yeah, they have two
Wow.
kids together. For me, okay, you found somebody who you're happy with.
Oh,
It's
right.
the important part, right?
Mhm.
Like the damage is already done. We had to figure out how to do damage control. It was tough because he filed bankruptcy. Everything from the business fell on me. And so there was like a financial, I call crisis moment. And
Right.
for me, like I had good credit my entire life. I didn't know what bad credit even looked like. I didn't
Right.
even know how to steer through that. So there
Mm-hmm.
was moments I was like, wait, I've never even experienced this through my parents. Like my parents always had good credit. I'm
Yeah.
like, now what? And I used to be a paralegal. And so like my paralegal brain, my legal thought process would be like, oh my gosh. But I knew in the back of my head that like there was a way out. It was just a matter of sitting and, like you said, pausing and being like, okay, this is one problem. How can we fix that? This is another problem. How can we fix that? And through the process, I learned to communicate better with him via text. I learned every moment he would push was another opportunity that was practice, right? Another opportunity where I could be like, okay, how can I communicate better? And what emotions are still arising, and how can I work on those emotions?
Because it's about you, really. Sometimes we think that it's our job to make the other person happy, or it's our job to help the other person see our point of view. It's not our job. No, it's our job to do it with ourselves, to work on ourselves, to grow day by day, but it's not our job to make anybody happy.
And on top of that, we don't have control over anyone else. The only thing we have control over is ourselves. And I can choose to react one way, and however that other person chooses to react,
that's up to them.
Not up to me. That was a huge learning moment for me, because I was always growing up, I was very compassionate. And so it turned from compassion to the fixer. And I recognized how many times I was fixing him, or fixing the problems, or fixing the children.
It wasn't your job.
No. And I had to just let go of all those reins and say, not my job. My job right now is just to create an opportunity where I'm whole, because I recognize too, like, I was depleted. I was that empty cup trying to pour with nothing in it. And I was like, what am I doing? I'm like, why am I so drained? Why am I so exhausted? And so that year away, first year moving to Pennsylvania, really helped me identify all those flaws, all those areas that I really needed to work on for me. And then over the years, it's been tweaking, right? Because it's always a work in progress.
What have you learned about yourself in this last 7 years you didn't know before?
I have learned that I grew up in a household where my dad drank a lot. And so that really affected. I was the oldest. And so a part of my behavior growing up as a child was to fix everything. And so I reckon that's where it started. And so for me, I had to learn, how can I go back to that child and say that to that child, it's okay. It was not your responsibility to fix everything. It wasn't your responsibility to make sure everything was okay. And I recognize even some of the traumas I experienced, they still were because of the behaviors that I adopted from those situations. And I recognize how powerful experiences in our lives can either hinder us or push us forward. And so for me, like codependency, learning boundaries, being able to say no, full sentence, stop, done.
No is a full sentence, but it is no explanation required. Okay, it's no, and it's no in a lot of languages. So hey,
it is. That was a huge learning curve for me, because I'd always be like, how did that make them feel? Maybe I said it in the wrong way. Maybe I should have said it nicer. And I recognize how much of my life I have overthought too many aspects. Overthinking was something I've really had to work on in the last 7 years, because most of my battle was up here. Most of it was the thought process that I would toy with and give into on a day-by-day basis. And so I was run by my thoughts. And so a lot of times in those 7 years, I had to battle, is it a thought that that's pushing me forward? Or is it a thought that's keeping me bound? Or is it a thought that's pushing me back 10 steps? Which thought is a good thought to hold on to that's going to help me progress as I move forward? And creating simple goals, simple obtainable goals, like not even like too far-fetched goals in the beginning, because I needed to see that progress. I needed to be able to see that it was possible. That's one of the reasons why I chose Rise, was because when we rise, you don't rise and you're not at the top of the pit. Like, there's a process of that pit.
Yeah.
And some pits are deeper than others. It depends.
For me, fear is face everything and rise. I have a sign in my studio that says that, and it's a reminder that I have that opportunity. And by you taking that opportunity, you became a better mom. And that's something that a lot of women that are going through a divorce don't understand that they have to take care of themselves first to be able to take care of the kids, because
Yes.
you cannot give from an empty cup. And if you don't nurture yourself, are empathetic with yourself, love yourself, care for yourself, how are you going to be able to do that to another human? And I applaud you for doing that and for taking care of yourself and healing, so you don't pass down those angry feelings, betrayal feelings, all those feelings that you received from him in a way, and you heal. And then
Yeah.
your kids can see you as the billboard. Look, mom is okay. Everything is going to be okay. We don't have to be resentful. We have to just watch what he did and understand that that is his journey. That's his mistake. And sometimes a bad example is the best example, because
Yeah.
we know what we don't want to have, what we don't want to be, what we don't want to receive, especially for your daughter. To see these are red flags that I need to take in consideration. So when I am ready to choose my partner, I can identify with that and say, wait a minute, I really don't want that.
Yeah. I think that's like a huge thing because of the factor that in the process, I could have been bitter.
Mm-hmm.
And and I'm not saying that I wasn't at
You
one
were
moment.
hurt, but you were
That
not
first year was
revengeful.
that first year was rough, but there was a moment where I recognized I was turning down a road of pure bitterness. And if I allowed it to continue, it was going to affect the relationship my children had with their dad, which is so crucial. And I just remember, like, God was a huge part of my process. And I remember God being like, you have to forgive him. And I'm like,
I don't
really?
want to. I don't want to.
Hard. I
I'm not
remember.
ready yet. I want to be angry at him another month.
And my drive to his house is like almost 3 hours. And I just remember that whole 3 hour drive. I was like, God, if you want me to apologize, he has to be out on the front porch, because he was never out on the front porch. He'd
So
always
why
have
would you apologize for?
I had to apologize for the factor of letting him go. Saying, I forgive you for betraying me. I forgive you for ruining our marriage. I forgive you for everything, for that moment that you chose to give up, right? Because you didn't give us a
Which is
chance.
the main thing, the giving up.
Yeah.
And not be honest. If you're not into me, leave. Why the betray? Why the hurting? Why the lying? Just go and allow me to find somebody that loves me for who I am, instead of forcing me in a way to live a lie for whatever time that lie was happening before he told you he wanted the divorce.
And it's not. And that moment even harder, because I was like, okay, so you're asking me to let go of everything. All I could picture was like taking a rope and completely letting it go and being like, okay, it's no longer tied to me. I'm severing all of that from me. And he was never outside with the kids. And I remember showing up and pulling up in the driveway, and sure enough, they're all standing outside. And I was like, I have to do this.
That's it.
But the moment that it was finished, I was like, the weight that lifted off my shoulders in that moment, like, we don't recognize how much like resentment and bitterness can affect us physically.
Absolutely. People get sick. People get sick when they hold all those negative feelings. And it's a ripple effect, because life and the universe and God doesn't give you anything until you heal from that. So I see people going like, everything goes wrong after my divorce, or after this, or after that, and I never got the life that I wanted. Well, you are holding on to so many negative feelings that you don't have any space for something pretty. I had my conversation with my ex-husband too, many, many, many years ago. I mean, I got divorced when my youngest one was 11 months old, and she's 27 now. So it was a long time ago. And we both acknowledge our responsibility. Like, whatever was my responsibility about not seeing things or recognizing the red flags, or not even not seeing the need that he had to be seen in a different way. I
Yeah.
thought that my way of loving was enough. But hey, the fact that my way of loving wasn't enough doesn't make it a bad way of loving. There's going to
No.
be somebody else who love the way I love.
Hmm.
And that is also something that you have to acknowledge. When
Yeah.
a relationship doesn't work, it's not one person's fault. Absolutely 100% one person did more to ruin it than the other one, but you also have some part in it. And when you recognize it and say, I'm sorry for
Yeah.
not seeing your needs. I'm sorry I didn't notice that you were not happy. I'm sorry that I was so much into my fantasy world and family and life that I wanted so bad. I didn't notice that you were in pain. Shame on you for going somewhere else before you talk to me, but I want to recognize what is my responsibility. And that is huge. That is huge
Yeah.
that you did that, because I'm sure that after that you felt like you were lighter.
Oh my goodness, I could have flew. And it's so interesting because in that moment, I remember it had to be in front of my children because my children needed to realize because they had watched so much happen.
Saw you in pain, which is so hard.
Mm-hmm.
I try to be very cautious with mine. I mean, my kids didn't see me cry. The first time they saw me cry was many years after, and they thought that somebody died. Why is she crying? I shelter them from that. But they did see the relationship, and they saw that we were both trying very hard to give them that stability. And kudos to you for doing that.
And for me, like 4 or 5 kids from before were best friends with my 4 kids. And so for me, I felt like it was a responsibility to teach them that things happen, but that doesn't mean that we just crumble it up and throw it away, right? Just because it looks ugly and it looks bad and it's not a mess, right? Instead, it's still, we roll up our sleeves. We still need to work at it because it's still a process. Maybe it's not like, hey, I'm going to invite them into my center circle and be best friends with them, but there's still somewhere in that circle of connection that you still have to have engagement. You still have to have a conversation. And you need to let go of everything because so often in divorce, we hold on to everything that happened to us, but all that does is place us into a victim mode. And so instead of saying, you know, I went through a divorce, they'll say, I was affected by, instead of saying I'm a survivor of the divorce, right? Like so often we're defined and we use our words
Oh my
such
gosh.
a powerful way that it's like, okay, wait, you just took ownership of that.
It's not your ex-husband. It's not yours anymore.
Yes.
Don't own it. It's not yours. It's the father of your children. It's not your ex-husband. It's really important how we talk. But at the end of the day, everything that happened for you.
It did. It's so beautiful because I wouldn't have changed it. I still would have gone through the exact same thing all over again.
Repeat.
Because what I've learned, and even where I work currently, like I currently work with women in addiction, and I look at the challenges and the traumas and the crisis moments that I've been through as a blessing because one, I can have compassion and I can have empathy for them, and I can be able to understand a level of their pain. Maybe it's not the same situation, but I can be like, wow, I can understand to some extent. Even coaching, for me, it's like women that have experienced loss is like the area that I know I have been called to speak to, because loss is the core of most trauma. Loss could be anything, but loss with a divorce is huge. I have other losses in my life, but that one really was my core. So sometimes I'm like, you know, it's just women who have experienced and who are trapped and stuck in loss. And I recognize that I had to go through what I went through so I can help another woman out of that pit, because I've been in that pit and I can reach my hand down and say, that's okay, follow me, or there's
It's
still
gonna be
light at
okay.
the tunnel.
It's gonna be okay.
Mhm.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so important. And I think that's why we experience things in life. We
Hmm.
experience them so we can help another individual who's going through it,
Yeah.
because that's what experiences are about. But sometimes we choose to stay in them, and that's where, like, unfortunately, nothing happens when we're sitting down. It's only when we choose to get back up. And sometimes the bloodier the knees are, the more you have to be able to offer to other people, because that just means your story is powerful. And so for me, that was like a realization in the last 7 years. Was I stopped asking why, and I started asking God, how can I use what I've been through to help
Hmm.
somebody else out? And how can I help them so they're not stuck in this victim mentality and have ball and chains to their past? Because we don't get anywhere, and it's so much more difficult, and no wonder they're exhausted.
Exactly. And that's beautiful what you said. Thank you. I really appreciate you opening your heart and sharing
Yeah.
all this. I have all your information for your training that you do, Rise to Create. We have here is about raising above the loss. And I think that's so important because you don't lose only when somebody dies. There is so many other ways that makes us feel like grieving. And it's so important to recognize that. So I'm having all your information there. If anybody's going through something like that, they can connect with you. And I really appreciate Tara being here.
Yeah, thank you so much. It was beautiful to hear your story, and awesome to see another survivor from loss. It's always amazing to be able to connect with others who have found beauty amidst the loss. So thank you so
Yeah.
much.
And I think that's the journey. And
Yeah,
it's beautiful to be able to share that knowledge with other people. So I really, really, truly appreciate you being here.
thank you so much.
Thank you all for listening to the Don't Shrink to Fit podcast. If you like this episode, please write a juicy comment below and subscribe to my podcast. Remember, we can only fly if we embrace each other. Until next week, be happy, be safe, and be kind to yourself.